Satan's prison house opened. There was a serious discussion going on in the throne room. Let's imagine what it might have been like if we had listened in. God the Son may have been saying that the people on earth had become so many and they were spreading over so much of the earth, they didn't need a different way of teaching them. The Father agreed, yes. He'd been thinking about a plan. It wasn't enough anymore to have only a family for teachers. How about having a whole nation to be an object lesson for the world? This nation would not have an ordinary man for a king. God would be their king. If they would obey him faithfully, he would make them such a great nation that the whole world could see how it is the wise thing to worship and obey the true God. Because they could be trusted to teach their families God's way, and because they had passed that terrible test about sacrificing Isaac, God chose Abraham and Isaac to be the fathers of this special nation. Through Isaac's grandson, Joseph, God made arrangements for his father Jacob and all his family to move to Egypt. There they had a country to themselves, and they multiplied rapidly. Look, said Satan to his angels one day as he pointed to the happy, prosperous nation of Israelites. Do you see what's happening? We'll have to put a stop to that. They looked with scowling faces. What more can we do about it? We're causing all the trouble we know how, but still they grow. A wicked smile spread over Satan's face as an idea struck him. You know the king, who was Joseph's friend, is dead, and the present king doesn't feel too friendly toward Joseph's people. I'll pay him a visit. And he sped toward the king's palace. Aren't you afraid of those Israelites? He whispered in the king's mind. Soon there'll be so many that they could rise up and take your kingdom away from you. You had better do something about them. Following the devil's suggestions, the king made slaves of the people, but in spite of backbreaking work and cruel whippings, they continued to multiply. Then Satan remembered something. Hadn't he heard God tell Abraham that in about 400 years, his people would come out of Egypt? It would soon be that time, and maybe God would be raising up a leader for his people. I'll kill two birds with one stone, Satan said to himself as he hurried back to the palace. He persuaded the king to order all baby boys drowned in the river. That would get rid of a lot of people and at the same time destroy the one whom God might plan to be the leader. An angel from heaven whispered an idea to one mother. She took her baby to the river. All right, but not to drown him. No, she had him fixed up cozy in a tiny cradle boat and prayed all the way to the river that somehow God would save him. Angels watched and saw to it that no one else found the little boat before the king's daughter came along. The Egyptians worshipped the river as a god, so maybe the heathen princess thought the river god was giving her this baby as a special gift. She felt pity for him when he cried. He was an unusually bright, handsome baby, so she decided right then to keep him for her own. She named him Moses, because that meant he was her river baby. Without knowing it, she hired the baby's own mother to take care of him. How faithfully the mother taught her boy about God, for in a few years the princess would take him away to a heathen palace. When Satan saw how angels guarded this particular baby, he soon decided it must be a very special child. I believe this is the one, he told his demon crew. God probably intends him to be the leader, but we'll spoil that plan. If we can get him killed some way, we can get him mixed up with these heathen ideas. If we can't get him killed some way, we can get him mixed up with these heathen ideas. Then God can't use him. They tried every possible scheme to tempt and confuse Moses. You can imagine how furious they were the day he decided he would rather be a slave and serve God than to be the great king of Egypt. Now what will we do? Asked Satan's angels. Well, if he is determined to lead God's people, let's get him to make a mistake. And they were successful in trying to stop an Egyptian who was beating an Israelite. Moses killed the Egyptian, and he had to run for his life away from Egypt. Well, that was neatly done, said the devil with grim satisfaction. That gets rid of Moses and his big ideas about leading the people. Poor Moses felt the same way. How he grieved over the foolish mistake that ruined his life and spoiled God's plan. He decided there was nothing left for him to do but to settle down in the desert and become a shepherd. 40 long years dragged by, and Moses was almost a forgotten man. With a cruel king torturing the Israelites and Moses out of the way, the devil felt he really had things going his way. Then one day he saw something strange. Moses seen the strange sight too, a bush all ablaze, but not burning up. Why, that's God the Son talking to Moses, thought the devil. I wonder what he wants. I must go over and listen. He heard God asking Moses to lead his people out of Egypt. That again, he muttered angrily. After all these years. He came close and persuaded Moses to offer all kinds of excuses. But Moses finally decided to follow God's plan. Satan was enraged and called a host of his evil angels. Come quickly. We have an important job ahead of us. And as they hurried over to Egypt, he told them what had happened and of his ideas for interfering with God's plans. Trouble, trouble, trouble. For the next 40 years, the devil and his angels worked furiously to make trouble at every turn. At first, the king wouldn't let the people go. Then he tried to capture them at the Red Sea. They ran out of water in the desert. They ran out of food. Heathen nations tried to fight them. God worked miracle after miracle to save them from these troubles. The people blamed Moses for everything that happened, but he was very patient with them. Not once did he say an unkind word, until one day, just before they entered the promised land, they were out of water again, and Moses was worn down with their endless complaining. So he carelessly struck the rock instead of speaking to it, as God had commanded, and he spoke impatient words. For that one mistake, God and Moses said Moses could not enter the promised land. Moses' heart was crushed. All his life, he had lived and worked for this one thing, and now it was taken away from him. How Satan must have gloated with evil joy over the disappointment and suffering of Moses. Moses pleaded and begged God to change his mind. It was such a little thing, only one impatient act. I am bitterly sorry, and I'll never do wrong again. Won't you please just let me go over and see the land? Say no more to me about it, said God. The matter is settled. So Moses dried his tears and got ready to leave. All alone, he trudged up the mountainside. The people silently watched the lonely figure until he had climbed out of sight. They were choked with tears, for it was largely their fault that Moses had been driven to impatience. Moses died on the mountain, and angels buried him and set a watch over his lonely grave. But one day, soon, there was a great excitement. One of the devil's messengers rushed to him in panic. Come quickly. Something is happening at Moses' grave. And Satan flew over with all speed. God the Son had come down from heaven with the angels who had buried Moses. He was going to do something that had never been done before in all the history of the universe. In heaven, every angel must have stopped to watch in breathless wonder as God was about to open Satan's prison house, the grave. You can't have him, he's mine, they heard Satan shout in angry alarm. When they are dead, they belong to me. Besides, he sinned, so he has no more right to go to heaven than I have. He could not resist taking the opportunity to tell God once again that his rules were too hard, that not even a good man like Moses had been able to obey them. God the Son did not stop to argue. He merely said, I will let the Father answer your charges and rebuke you. Then, oh wonder of wonders, he spoke the word, and Moses came forth from his grave. His face was radiant with joy as he looked upon God the Son, and the shining angels gathered about him. And as Satan and his host stood looking up in baffled rage, the joyous group ascended into heaven, where they were welcomed by myriads of glorious singing angels. I imagine for days it was the only thing the excited angels could talk about, how God had brought the dead back to life. We wondered how it would be, they said to one another. How could they live again after Satan destroyed them? Wasn't it wonderful to see? And they went about their work singing more happily than ever before. Maggie's heart was thrilled by the story. It must have been like watching God create a new world and new people. It was something even more wonderful than that, said Aunt Trudy. To create a new being out of new material is one thing, but to make a glorious, immortal being out of one that has been ruined by Satan and sin, that is truly God's greatest miracle. That is why there is more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over many who do not need to repent.